Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Awesome. How's it going?
Good, thanks. Yourself?
I'm doing well. It's
All
been a
right.
it's been a good week for us. Yeah.
Excellent. So I am joined by, well, would you like to introduce yourselves and your roles in the project?
Yeah. So my name is Kartik. I am a lead game designer and front end developer and artist and probably a couple of other things. So that's me. I'm Kartik. I'm here with my roommate.
Hi, I'm Eric. I do a lot of the back end stuff, kind of getting more systems set up for when we do game jams and full game projects like that.
And we're two parts of Finite Reflection Studios. It's a company we started. Oh boy, how many years ago now?
I think back in 2014.
Yeah. We've been as a company for a while. We've made a few games on Steam, but we've always been very impartial to participating in as many game jams as possible.
Nice. All right. Well, first of all, really quickly, Sky and Sam, thank you for the follow. And yeah, so we're going to go ahead and begin with the questions that I have here. But if anyone in chat has any questions that they would like to pass along, then please do post them in, and I'll ask our guests. So go ahead and start in with asking, how do you decide on what you're going to make for the jam?
Yeah. So I feel like we have a pretty solid brainstorming process at this point. Every time a jam starts, we take the theme and we just stream of consciousness, no wrong answers, just write down everything that comes to mind, every single word that comes to mind, every single thought that crosses our mind. If we come up with any specific idea, we'll write that down too, and be like, okay, maybe this idea, but nothing, we don't commit to anything. We just write it all down. And then we do our best to basically ignore that initial list of things, basically. And what we found, basically, in our experience, is that kind of helps us to, avoid some of the more obvious ideas. Because if you came up with it instantly right after hearing the theme, chances are it might not be the world's most creative idea right out the gate. You might have gotten super lucky. You never know. But again, probability wise, you might as well try to push yourself a little further.
Yeah, even one of our initial ideas that we scrapped was going to be the type of game where you move rooms around to platform different places, and then we were like, yeah, we kind of came up with that one pretty quickly, and then we saw a lot of other people, do that kind of idea, and we saw a lot of people do that idea better than we had initially scoped it out, so, we're happy we kind of steered away from that one.
Yeah,
Nice.
I mean, from there, it's basically just, we keep chasing down different ideas, and we have a list of, basically ways of scoring our own ideas for a lot of different methods, feasibility, the scope that we imagine it being, and obviously just, are we excited about it? Is it something that we want to play? But yeah, we score all of our ideas and then pick one eventually.
Yeah.
Nice. And yeah, I remember that stream that I was watching. Yeah, that warp core transition looks really cool.
Thank you.
How did you actually create that effect? I assume shaders are involved in some form or function?
Yeah, it's actually I didn't write any shaders myself for it. I just used Unity's built-in post-processing effect. It has the only effect that I'm really using there is the I can't remember the name of it. I think it's just called lens distortion. So you apply the lens distortion, and it's a couple of other things layered on top of that. In addition to the lens distortion, I'm also pulling back the field of view of the camera. At the same time, I'm moving the camera forward. So it's just sort of the combination of those three things really suddenly makes you feel like you're going warp speed.
Yeah, that's really cool. That it's not even it's a really clever application of some simple ideas.
Thank you.
And I think I'm going to lose to the very first enemy that I fight here. Okay.
So the version that you're playing right now is actually... oh shoot, yeah, you may want to restart your run at this point. Or just let it kill you, that's fine. Yeah, we did release a post-jam update to help with some of the balance issues, some balance feedback that we got during the jam. We didn't want to change too much with this because we want to leave this to be kind of true to the jam version as much as possible. But we did feel like there were just some very tiny, very major bugs. When I say tiny, I mean like a single line of code needed to change to fix a very major bug that were preventing being able to appreciate this game the way we intended it to be made, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, you know, that was why, like, I was saying on my streams, I don't know how many people actually took advantage of this, but I know it was like, oh, it's against the rules and whatever, but for the purposes of evaluation, I was always saying, like, oh, you know, go ahead and send me your fixed version of the game. Like, don't worry, don't sweat it, because while I understand why that rule exists, I don't want to... I don't want people to be sending me a version of their game where it's like, well, you can only play to the second level, so I'm sorry, like, it's broken after that. You know, I would rather experience the game in its entirety and not have to wait till the post-gen version just to showcase it. Alright, so I'm glad that it felt like you didn't have to make that many critical changes to the game in order to end up with a version that you were happy with. And is this where you're planning on leaving things off, is this version?
Definitely for like this particular itch release that you see here, we have we're definitely excited about this game idea. We're currently very close to releasing actually last year's GMTK Jam game as a full game on Steam. So we're trying to like focus on finishing that first. That one's called Gardener and the Wild Vines. We've already got a Steam page up and, you know, doing our whole wish listing campaign on that, and we're so close to that finish line. We don't want to get too distracted by our shiny new toy that we have here. So we are focusing on finishing that, and then once that's done, I'm going to sit down with the team and make sure that everybody's on board to move forward with this. But yeah, I mean, we're super happy with how it turned out.
Nice. I'm really glad to hear that. Like the last year, the Gardener and the Wild Vines. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. I was just like, there's a lot of words in that sentence. I just want to make sure. Okay. It's not that many. I'm just always with the splitting focus is an issue for me. So I think I actually played that game. I don't know if I got a chance. I don't think I had a chance to interview the developer of that one, because you guys are part of a larger studio where individual members can take part in the different jams. So I don't know. I seem to recall.
So our studio is just me and Eric and two other friends.
Okay.
So we're not a particularly large studio. We do. When we participate in jams, it is almost always usually just Eric and I who make the games in our jams. So we've participated in GMTK jams since its inception, and we always participate in Global Game Jam, and usually those are the two that we try to get to every year.
Nice.
If we can find another one to do, we might do it, but yeah.
Do you have any particular preference between, say, Global Game Jam or Ludum Dare or any other smaller local jams?
Global Game Jam was the first one where we all came together as a team and made a game and decided we wanted to keep working together. So we're always down to do that jam because of nostalgia a little bit. But it's also just such a big one as well that, like, you know, we can see a lot of people around our community, and I don't know. Now it's about like doing refresher, but I usually like the themes better for GMTK Jam, just because with it being Mark Brown, he usually puts a lot of thought into, like, kind of like what our prototype or what our idea process is. You know, like when we sit down and hear the theme, we think about what can be done with it, what are all the different variations of this theme, and I feel like Brown probably does the same thing when he is creating a theme, to be like, what are all the different ways that people might be able to take this and do interesting design things with it. I can't even imagine how many like iterations of themes he can go through. So, I really enjoy the challenges that come with his. They make us think.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like I've gone through, and I'm pretty sure I've seen every single GMTK video, aside from some of the more recent ones, because I make such a task out of it for myself to not only just watch the video, but to also like take notes on it as I go. And so, since I've been very busy the last couple of weeks, I haven't had time to actually go through some of the more recent ones. But yeah, I find, even if I don't always 100% agree with Mark, I find it's like good food for thought, and that's why I'm taking notes, because like, yeah, I'll take down what he has to say about it, and then I'll say like, well, you know, and then consider this option, or consider this, and I find myself always adding to, if not necessarily contradicting what he's saying. Like, I'm usually in agreement with him, I should say, by and large.
Yeah, and we both have some experience working in, you know, the game industry, working with various game designers of various skill levels, and I feel like one of the things I've always learned about working with people who are game designers by trade is just that, like, they have the theory down, in that they may not always tell you exactly like what you might find fun, but they can always inform you on, you know, the consequences of your decisions and that kind of stuff. And that's one of the things I always enjoy about watching any of Mark Brown's videos in general, but also watching the way that he provides feedback to games for GMTK Jam, and the way that he picks games for them is always really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So I think we can move on to our next question then, which is, what was your development process like for this game?
Sure. So as with like some of our other things I've said before, where we have kind of like a process, this is, I can't remember how many jams we've done to this point, but due to the number that we have done, I feel like we've established a rhythm with the way that Eric and I work together. And that usually involves just like, okay, we have our idea, great. Kartik is just gonna like start throwing code at the wall. A lot of it's gonna be bad, a lot of it's gonna get deleted pretty quickly, but he's just gonna start throwing code at the wall until we have like what we can establish as being like a mechanic done. And I usually try to get that done within the first sitting of the jam. So like before we even had before the end of the first evening, because the jam started at what, like 2 p.m. Our time. Before dinner time, I had like a little ship module moving around that you could right click on and like attach something to, because I mean that was the core mechanic. We needed to make sure we had that to see where everything else is going to fall from there. And while I'm doing that, Eric, well, you can talk about what you do.
Yeah, I usually start going with, I'm kind of assuming that our initial idea that we've started is going to be our idea. And so there's no point in me, you know, wasting time of waiting for Kartik to figure out if it is fun or not. So I'm kind of operating on the assumption that it is fun, we'll keep going with it. And so I start looking at what is a like minimally acceptable backend that I can code to where, you know, I'm not coding databases and all these other kinds of like crazy things, but I'm still making it possible for us to iterate on our game as fast as possible. So once Kartik and I meet back up kind of for that first round, you know, we talk about what each of us have accomplished separately. I don't know that we've had a jam that we've pivoted on like halfway through. We usually feel pretty good about our idea. And so once that happens, we kind of just, most of the time we reaffirm that this is what we want to do, it feels good. Yeah, we talk about any changes. This is actually, I think, one of the first jams where we had kind of a major miscommunication at the beginning, where I was doing everything in 2D and Kartik was doing everything in 3D. And so when we came together, I was like, whoops. I guess I'll convert my stuff and we'll go from there. But it all worked out, so.
Right, I'm glad to hear that that was resolved. Like, so do you mean like you were doing the artwork in 2D, or what aspect of the game were you like building in 2D at that point?
The first part, so Kartik was doing all the art in 3D and getting ships flying around in 3D, and I was doing a lot of the logic behind connecting the modules and setting up modules.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of that was based on 2D physics in Unity, and since we were actually going to use 3D instead, I had to just, it wasn't that much, I had to rewrite a lot of it to be the 3D specific functions instead of the 2Ds.
Yeah, alright. Well, I'm glad that it didn't result in, like, you were still able to finish everything on time. Did you have to, like, cut or change anything in order to finish the game as a result?
Because of that, I think, yeah, like Eric mentioned, like there was that slight miscommunication. Thankfully, the extent of it was basically just like, you know, I had started making art in 3D, but I mean the game is you know, as you can see right now, it's basically a 2.5D game, right?
Yeah.
So it could have worked even if we had stayed with the 2D physics that Eric had started with, but we ended up just saying like, hey, you know what? It's not going to be the end of the world to just change it over to 3D physics now, and so we did. And it really helps too that like, I don't know, like I've worked on jam games where miscommunications have caused severe issues, and usually, oftentimes, that is more of an issue due to like personality clash and or like a layered miscommunications where people are like confused about something and then wanting to blame someone about it or something like that. One of the nice things, at least, that, you know, with the way that Eric and I have worked together for the past few years, has just been that, you know, if there is miscommunication, there's no like assigning of blame. There's no like, okay, you know, like, oh, you did this, you did that. It's just like, okay, what are we doing next? How do we get this fixed? Let's move. Let's keep moving forward.
Good. Yeah, I think that's definitely a healthy way to approach development. It's just like, okay, you know what? No time to grouse about it. No time to spend like ways to assigning blame. Let's just get a move on, and you know, next time we know, we'll try to keep the channels open. And yeah, I think that so much of a like successfully working in a larger team comes down to that idea of clear communication. So I'm glad that that's goes over smoothly for you guys most of the time.
I do learn.
Oh, sorry, you got a little quiet there.
No, it was good. Yeah, we only really kind of ran out of time. Oh, can you hear us?
Yeah, all good.
Okay. Yeah, we only really ran out of time for some things like properly balancing. We didn't really have time to play through the entire game, and which is why we ended up having kind of a bad bug after you got through like 6 portals. But most of that was just honestly us reaching our limit of what we could accomplish in a weekend, and so you know, it was fine with that.
Yeah, we definitely bit off more than we are used to chewing on a jam game. So we, yeah, it impacted us in that we didn't have the amount of time that we normally have for playtesting and making sure that things are balanced, making sure that it's, you know, relatively bug-free. There's always bugs. This is the first one, however, where there was like a pretty critical bug that turned what was supposed to be an endless game into a game that just suddenly stops after 6 levels. As well as the fact that like it was dismally unbalanced to the point that, you know, I mean, people still had fun with it. Obviously, you know, like I think if they didn't, I don't think Mark Brown would have picked it. But yeah, it was. It had some problems, but thankfully none of them were that bad. It was actually so minor that literally, as I was sitting there watching Mark Brown announce our game in the top 20 video, I instantly pulled up the project and started making changes and released an update within an hour, so it was fine.
Nice. I'm really glad that worked out. So what, I don't know, like, I guess I have to ask, what was the bug?
The bug for the enemies that stopped spawning after Sector 6 was basically just, the way that we have our enemies spawning in is that we, in air quotes saying hand designed, because they're not really hand designed, it's basically just like, we had an array of possible enemies, and these arrays were subgrouped based off of like difficulty tiers, and so when you hit Sector 6, the game was like, cool, we've hit a new difficulty tier. Time to start spawning enemies in Tier 4, and guess what? There is no Tier 4, so it just doesn't spawn anything.
Okay.
So literally, it was like a single line of change. And then there was another single line change where I wasn't properly normalizing the movement vector, which meant it was possible to always move. Oh my gosh! Sorry, I'm watching your stream. I just saw you just got annihilated for a second there. Now I lost my train of thought. What was that thing? Movement code, right? Yeah. So you can hold down left, and if you held down left and right simultaneously, you would be able to move like twice as fast, basically, because I wasn't normalizing the movement input.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're coming back from this one. I got one turret, one shield module. I got one of everything. It's all good.
There's still some parts floating around you might be able to pick up, possibly.
There we go.
Oh, there you go. You got more protection.
I like it.
Oh no! Don't
Right.
forget you can pause. You can.
Yes, the tactical pause. Yes.
Good.
Yeah, every once in a while I find just like random parts strewn about in space. Is that like, are those left over from previous levels, or like what's going on with that? Have enemies destroyed each other?
Those are ones that you have destroyed this round. That was actually something we didn't have time for, because I wanted them to be randomly spawning pieces, so that obviously if you fought a ship and it destroyed all your turrets, you're not just kind of stuck. But that was kind of a bigger system change we didn't have time for.
Yeah, alright. Well, in this case it kind of worked out. The only reason I was asking is because when I started Sector 5, there were like a couple gears floating in space, and I think those were there from the previous level.
Yeah, I think we don't reset the gears.
Yeah, that one might just be a bug where we clear out all the enemies, we clear out any floating ship parts that are floating in space, but we might not be clearing the gears.
Yeah, and honestly, I think I saw that, and I was like, that's fine. That'll help
Yeah,
some
pretty
people.
much. Alright.
Another kind of big change that you can see in this version versus the actual one we submitted is that we also weren't telling you when your mass was reaching the point where you couldn't move properly and stuff like that, and so we just added that right there at the bottom, because some people figured it out, but it was still kind of a weird, like, am I slowing down because I'm big? Yes. Okay. I have no clue how to measure that, but I guess I'll just deal with it. And so we wanted to put something up there to help people realize it.
Yep, that definitely came in handy. Like, I specifically when it starts turning red, as it's like, hey, you're really like overburdening your engines and your energies, what you're capable of.
And I think it's an interesting thing too how I made that change because as I was watching some people play our submitted jam version, I saw some players who would get frustrated about the reduced movement as they got larger, and I could tell they were like, "Oh gosh, I don't like the fact that as I get bigger, I go slower." And then that same player would get late into the game and be like, "Wow, I'm so big, and I'm just destroying everything. I wish the game would make me have a reason to jettison stuff." And so I always found that I thought that was super interesting, and my interpretation of that is basically just that that it was frustrating due to a lack of communication, and that was it. I don't think that people really had an issue with the fact that you slow down when you're bigger. It was that they didn't know why it was happening and couldn't reproduce it reliably. So I didn't even change the code that affects your movement speed. All I did was I added the bars in the bottom that communicated. And since then, watching some people play it and reading some comments, I've been seeing people not being as frustrated about that.
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad you're getting less browsing because, like, I don't know, it seems intuitive to me. There's some trade-off for like being massive starship, but right. I do notice that some enemies like tend to run away from you. Is there a specific behavior that influences that?
No, enemy AI was basically just like the dumbest but most functional AI that we could code in the amount of time that we had, right? Mm-hmm. So their AI is pretty simple. They have an aggro distance within which they will aggro on you. Then if you get far away enough from them, they will chase a little bit, but then give up the chase after a little while. And then lastly, they have this. I added a little bit of like noise to their behavior, so that's usually what you might be seeing if they ever move away from you. There's no code specifically telling them to do that. If they ever move away from you, that's just part of like I'm just going to call it like AI noise that I added, where their decision making will get randomized a little bit to make them seem like they're making organic decisions.
Right. And then in general, they're sort of operating on the simple logic of, I assume, like the range in which they will notice you is slightly larger from the range at which they will lose. Like, can you actually lose aggro on an enemy, or do they just sort of?
Yeah, totally lose aggro if you run away enough.
Okay. Nice. All right. So this I always love to ask. Oh, and then of course this is something that every streamer realizes at some point is that you can zoom out. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It does say right there, zoom with scroll wheel. But I'm curious, is it listed on the itch.io page? I did read
it might not be. Huh.
Okay, there we go. I'm going to blame the fact that it's not on the
itch.io page right here on screen.
But yeah, so my next question then is, can you recommend a useful shortcut or a clever hack in the Unity engine that you think would be useful to others?
Useful hack.
We'll both do one each, because again, as mentioned earlier, Eric focuses on back end and hooks on front end. For me, let's see. Like, there's so many. I'm trying to think of one that I used in particular on this that helped me more than others. I really find it useful to man, it's so hard to like think of like one useful thing off the top of my head. I think when it comes to like game feel and stuff, that's usually the thing that I'm always most concerned about, because I feel like even a decent game idea can be ruined with bad game feel. And so I always try to like prioritize making sure that, in the case of this game, I always try to make sure that when you shoot an enemy, the bullets have like a nice impact and that kind of stuff. So I don't know about like a Unity specific tip, but your bullets can just be capsules. That's all they are in this game, but at least they're nice, big, chunky, capsules that stand out, and you get to get a little sense of excitement when you see like a volley of those big capsules flying through a ship. Even if they're simple models, you don't have to like go and make a fancy shape for them. As long as they're easy to read and have a direction that you can understand. I found that when you use a sphere for a projectile, they seem to have a lot less sense of velocity, but when you use a capsule, they're immediately something interesting to watch as they fly. Yeah, I don't know. Just make your bullets big and make them capsules. They're nice.
All right.
Eric is still sitting here scratching his chin.
No, it's so hard to think of like a Unity hack. I mean, because like a lot of our stuff, we've just done so many game jams over the years that we know our strengths and our limitations, and so a lot of times we can pretty easily gauge, like, okay, I've got this task for this game, that'll probably take me an hour, maybe two. And so that's one of the reasons I think we're so efficient in terms of a game jam. I didn't even see that shit there because I thought it was just a bunch of parts.
Me too. I think there's in
They
fact
were
two
hiding.
ships.
They were hiding. Emergent AI behavior.
Oh.
Yeah, if I think of a hack,
Yeah, no worries. Why is my screen flashing red around the border?
You know, that's a fantastic question. I was just thinking about that. If you hover over your command module, it looks like you are low on health. So maybe
Yeah.
something broke with your health for some reason.
Okay.
It's not updated. That's weird. Thank you for the free QA.
I mean, you know, to a small extent, that is what I'm trying to do as part of these interviews. Like, that's the reason that I don't play the game at all before the stream, is because I want a fresh opinion of it as I am, like, talking to the developers for the first time. And it's not just because I don't have any time to play these outside of streams. But yeah, I think that, you know, even if you were seeing me try this game at like 1/3 brain capacity between also trying to listen to what you have to say and also trying to keep on top of chat, you know, maybe my 1/3 brain capacity is still going to be useful to compare against some metric of players, although that seems really mean when I say it out loud.
No, definitely. I mean, honestly, it's been one of the hardest parts about adapting to a global pandemic, which is that, you know, we'd gotten used to always getting to go to shows and, you know, like showing our games at GTC and PAX and watching people play it. You know, that was so valuable, and that's something that we haven't really been able to do for so long now. And Twitch has been a nice way to kind of make it a little bit better in being able to watch people play it, even if it's a little bit, even if they're distracted. Just seeing how they react to literally any part of the game is super valuable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's something that you want, you know, in general as a developer, is to watch people play without saying anything, so you can get kind of their native, just what they do, how they react to stuff. I'll never forget, I went to a conference where somebody was, you know, talking to me about their game as I was playing it, and in the middle of him telling me all of these cool things about his game, the character ran off screen into the void and just ran endlessly. And I even like kind of slowly held the device up by my face, and he just like didn't notice that the game had broken. And I was like, well, that's cool. Thanks for all the info about the game, I guess. So you definitely want to just, you know, let people do their thing, because it's far more informative than you telling them how to do things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, you know, like, how else are you going to get good feedback on the project if you're not, like, observing it and not telling the player what to do? You know, if you spend too much time, like, saying, like, oh, and here's how you do this, you'll never know whether the player was able to figure that out for themselves.
Well, I can't remember who told me this, but I always love the phrase of, you're not going to be standing behind them while they're in their living room deciding if they're not to buy your game, you know? So they need to be able to make that decision on their own, and so you got to get that communication across when you're not there.
Yeah, exactly. You have to account for the fact that, like, the game has to teach the player how to play the game. It has to teach, like, it is a sort of, that's the whole point of a effective tutorial. Like, you can't count on players to read the manual. You can't count on players to read all the text in the game, you know, unfortunately. So the game kind of has to, like, in some genres that's more feasible than others, but fundamentally the game has to teach through its design, through its play, how it's played.
Yeah, I mean, and every gamer is going to be different, so getting as many people to, you know, play it as possible is great. I remember watching someone play this game kind of after we were done, and they were like, man, it is so hard to click on individual turrets and aim things. I wish I could just use them all. And the whole chat was like, use the button that's on the bottom of the screen. And he was like, I didn't even see that. Thank you for pointing that out, Jack. So it's, yeah, you can do as much as you can, but you just can't hit everybody.
Yeah, it really does come down to that. In fact, I say, ah ha ha, I have not made that mistake. I've been clicking that button, and then I just realized, oh, there's a hotkey. I can press X to do it instead.
Actually, the hotkey was one of those features that we added post-jam due to just people who did find the buttons very helpful, but then they were just like, gosh, I hate moving my mouse down there to press it. And I was like, all right, we'll make it even easier for you. Here we go.
I mean, that said, it is a little awkward to take your hands off of the movement input to press the hotkeys.
Mm-hmm. Is there a button you think might be more convenient to press?
I think that even with the rotation, I would almost want to be able to use like right click and drag to make my ship spin.
Interesting. Huh.
Just because, again, if I want to make my ship rotate, I'm taking my hands off of the movement keys. It's hard to move and rotate at the same time. So that's why I'm wondering if either the and then what is left click? Does left click do anything other than target or clear target?
Yeah,
no, okay, it's clicking on things to jettison. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't have a function unless you click on something.
Mm-hmm. So I guess if you, okay, I'm on Sector 6 here, and I downloaded the exe. Is the exe fixed, or is it the web version that's fixed?
Well, they should both be fixed, but looks like we're having some issues again.
All right.
That's super weird, huh?
Oh my goodness. I guess I just have...
I know for a fact at least some people have played the updated one and confirmed for me that the bug was fixed, so it looks like there is still something that is causing it to happen somehow. Not sure what that is, but thank you again for revealing more bugs for us to check out.
Well, I guess... So what I was going to ask, though, is if let's say I pause right now, and I can mouse over enemy stuff. Most of what I've just been doing is saying target all turrets and then clicking on the enemy command module. So I'm wondering if, rather than having to say target all turrets, in the same way that I can get a context menu from left-clicking on my own stuff, if I click on an enemy thing and then I can say, hey, everyone shoot this.
Yeah, so we have... There's part of the... Sorry, losing my train of thought here. Yes, I agree, basically, are my thoughts. I think that to help sort of explain where we land, why and how we landed on the decisions that we did, is that, I guess to sort of backtrack a little bit on what something Eric said earlier, we did pivot a little bit, but very softly. Softly enough that we didn't quite notice that we needed to make some changes to the user experience of this game. Because part of the idea originally was that you were going to be micromanaging because specific modules were going to take more damage than others, and you're going to try to strategically sort of carve away at enemy ships to defeat them. But as you can see in the finished product, it is almost always the best option is to always just shoot the command module and win that way, which loses some of our intended strategy that we wanted.
Yeah. What was that game that we found today? Or that
Captain Forever, I think.
Captain Forever. So yeah, we had not played or seen this game before we made the Jam version, and then we looked at this Flash game called Captain Forever, and very similar to our concept of you pick up modules, put them on your ship, blow up enemy ships, and I found it interesting that it was the same thing. I didn't see the person who was playing it, who played for 30 minutes or an hour, ever do anything except shoot the command module, or that game's version of the command. So I find it, I guess it makes sense, seeing another game do that, and knowing that that's where we also landed, basically, is that just seems to be what people want to do in this kind of game.
Yeah, like the only thing that would stop me from shooting at the command module would be if there was like a shield module that I specifically had to take down first in order to then take down the command module.
Yeah, I think that's part of. We're basically, one of the things we have to decide now, moving forward, with this is how much of the design limitations we had due to it being a jam game do we want to maintain, and how much do we want to just like completely iterate and make just exactly the way we want it to. And if I had exactly my way during the jam, this would play a little bit more like FTL, where one of my favorite elements of FTL was strategically deciding, hey, I want to aim this turret at that room, and then I want to aim this turret at that room because I want to first reduce the amount of power that ship has. Then I want to take down their shields, and it kind of made me feel like I was commanding a battleship in the middle of an epic Star Wars battle, and that was what I wanted to go for. But obviously, in the jam time, you don't have the time to refine your design, which is obviously the fine developers of FTL do. So who knows, maybe, if that will be the direction we take this in going forward. I think with some exceptions, like for instance, fixing some of the bugs that we found here today, we're going to not be like tweaking this iteration a whole lot because I want to try and leave it kind of like honest to what we made for the jam. But if we move forward with it, we've definitely got a lot of different ideas about where this might go.
Absolutely. So just really quickly, I want to acknowledge that Doctronic here in chat is saying that this game reminds him of Streamlands, a old Flash game they used to play.
Yeah, I think so. I was also streaming development during the jam, and I feel like someone came by the stream and mentioned this one to me because it's a Nitro game, and as soon as they mentioned it and sent me a screenshot, I was like, yeah, nice. This is pretty similar in its essence of what it's going for.
Yeah. So it's not a game that I'm particularly familiar with, but I assume it's like, I don't know, is the core mechanic similar? Like.
Yeah, so I mean, it plays. I don't know if it actually like plays the same because I haven't played it myself. But like looking at screenshots, it's basically this. But instead of in space, you're driving like a steampunk car across a desert, and you just sort of like add rooms to it and add turrets to it, and it has the similar type of micromanagey elements to it. Again, going off purely the screenshots that I find when I looked it up.
Right. Yeah, and I realized I misread it. It is Steamlands, not Streamlands. I've been doing too much streaming these last couple days. But yeah, so to acknowledge what you've been saying about the more sort of tactical, thoughtful approach to combat, I guess that is a pretty major pivot point on which this game could sort of come down on either side of. Because on the one hand, you can really like lean into the arcadey nature of the game and just say that like, hey, your ship auto-targets whatever's closest to you, and then you hold down the button, lock on target, and your ship will always aim in that same direction. You just sort of like rotate around it, and the game's basically a bullet hell. That's one option. Or you can take it in the direction of the like super tactical, almost like a turn-based game, almost. Like you are constantly pausing the game, or the game is pausing itself every few seconds, or something along those lines, where you're constantly saying like, okay, we had a lucky hit here, there's a vulnerability in the bulkhead, let's target that one to deal extra damage to the ship and maybe hit a reactor core and then make it faster to take down the overall ship. So I can see the game evolving in two very distinct ways. It's a divergent evolution.
Yeah, we're kind of the game as it stands right now is kind of like straddling those genres in a debatably good or bad way. I think some people, when they played it, didn't quite connect with the fact that it is both arcade and tactical. And some players may prefer one over the other. So it's I totally hear you. Like it could easily be two completely different genres depending on how we decide to develop the mechanics further.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it's funny to me because I made a game, this one in the sort of thumbnail image above me, that I called Allocate, and I said, hey, it's a tower defense game that's got some real-time elements. And this isn't the first time I've done this. I've made a previous game that I released on Steam that had this sort of blend between genres of like, hey, it's tower defense, but also a little bit of real-time strategy because you can manually dictate your targets, you know, kind of what you're doing here too. But it was funny to me to see people saying like, oh, cool, I didn't expect to see a real-time strategy in this game jam. It's like, I think Allocate is very heavily in the camp of tower defense with some real-time elements, as opposed to Orbit, which I do think is a bit more of a fusion between the genres. And it's interesting to see where Orbit wasn't necessarily super well received because people in the tower defense camp were saying, oh, there's only 5 satellites. That's boring. I want to have 20 towers in my games. And I'm sitting there thinking, really? You want 20 versions of the tower that's all just like, this is the same tower, just slightly stronger, like the Plants vs. Zombies way of creating towers, and it's like, that's boring to me. But that's what tower defense players want, I guess, because that's what the core appeal of the genre is to them. So I guess I'm not making any more tower defense games because I find that stuff boring and I find the real-time strategy aspect of it more interesting. And I think that, and of course I also like turn-based strategy, so I see like both aspects of this game, like both of the divergent paths that it could take in evolving, both sound like they could be of interest to me. So I like the sort of like tactical turn-based nature of games. I haven't played FTL, but I really liked Into the Breach, which was like super tactical. And then I can also see really enjoying the sort of like arcadey spin of the game. So I think whatever direction you're taking it in, it's going to be, the greatest difficulty is going to be finding that core appeal. Like, what does the audience think this is? And how can we connect the game to that? Like, how do we make sure we zero in on that core appeal so that that audience is happy with what we've given them?
Exactly, yeah. I think that's been one of, like, beyond just, you know, getting good at making games, I feel like one of the next steps for me personally on my developer journey has been sort of like getting better at understanding what, not just like what players in general want, but like what your audience wants and what your target audience wants. Because it's one thing to just make a good game, it's another thing to like design a game for that audience and fully know and appreciate the things that they are looking for in your game and you know, make it for them. Because then at the end of the day, if you're trying to make a profit off of your games, you are making games for people, and you have to consider what they do and don't like.
Yep. All right. Well, if we don't have any other questions coming in from chat, but if if anyone is curious, please feel free to submit. Otherwise, what are your plans with this game going forward? Do you feel like an inclination towards leaning in one direction or another?
We haven't talked so much about it, so we haven't reached a consensus. My personal, right off the cuff feeling is I want to try going more the tactical route, just because our last 2 games. So the first big game that we released on Steam was called Twin Cop, and that was a very like arcadey, top-down twin stick shooter. And then the game we're currently working on, Lines, is a pretty like fast-paced, action-y type, platformer game. My feeling is I just want to, I want to expand our horizons. I want to try something a little bit different and try to take it the more FTL, Into the Breach, methodic, thought-provoking strategy game, and really try to appeal to that audience, because I do enjoy those games a lot myself, but I've never made a game in that genre before, and I think that might be a fun challenge and a fun type of game to make.
Nice. That sounds great. Okay, so I guess we are sort of at the end of our questions here, in which case I'll just ask, are there any other shout-outs to any other people? And then you've already mentioned the project that's forgive me, the Wild Vines project.
Yeah, we got
Gardner and the
Wild
Wild Vines. Yes. If you want to send me a link to that, I'll pull it up on the stream here, and then anyone else you want to give a shout out to.
I think I saw on Discord and Twitch that you have already chatted with the team behind Factory, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Awesome. Yeah, so the developers at Starcube Games are some friends of ours, and really, really blown away by the game that they made. Factory is so inventive. Besides them, I mean, like, yeah, there's no shortage of awesome games to check out for this from this jam. Honestly, I don't know, Eric, if you had any off the top of your head that you wanted to shout out that you liked. I know I personally really enjoyed playing Maze of the Minotaur.
Yeah, that's one I was thinking of because I really like how much like polish goes into it. You know, like getting a finished game is great. Getting a finished game that has a ton of polish is amazing because it just feels, you know, I don't know. The more polish something has, the more it feels like a complete game, even if it's not, because it was a game jam. So, but yeah, I mean, we saw quite a few that we enjoyed. I mean, I always really like when people find an idea and I'm like, man, that didn't even come up during our brainstorm. Like, that's a pretty good thing they landed on. It's cool that someone thought of that.
Yeah,
I played and rated like about 70 different games during the jam, and got to chat with so many developers. I'm trying to remember any specific ones. I really enjoyed Dongle Hell as well. The one about connecting the computer dongles to make a presentation. That was so clever.
Yeah, that one was a lot of fun. I was able to, between all the people submitting games to me, it wasn't as many interviews, but it was 116 games that I rated over the course of the jam. And yeah, I got a chance to interview the developers of Maze of the Minotaur and also the Dongle Hell game just the other day. So yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I don't know if I could. I don't know if I can recommend someone that you might not have already interviewed.
Oh no, there are so many people. Like I'm still trying to get in touch with other developers from the top 20 games. A few of which have said like, "Hey, you know, I'm sorry, I'm too shy for an interview." And I was like, "Okay, well, maybe you can still fill out the questions, and I can read those out for people because I'm sure people want to know more about these games." And yeah, so Gardner and the Wild Vines, I did play this as part of last year's GMTK jam. So I think that the reason I might have gotten my wires crossed is because I might have just seen it on a streamer's page and assumed that it was their game and not realize that they were just playing it because it was your game. So I don't remember connecting with either of you guys last year, but I do remember finding this out.
Yeah, well, yeah, it was the first, I think, platformer that we'd ever prototyped, and honestly, like, when I played the Jam version, I'm still surprised that people liked it enough that we, turned it into a full game. Because honestly, I was not a fan of the Jam version at all. But it's been a fun project. It started with this, focus on platforming and cutting flowers to climb, and has kind of turned into, honestly, a very story-driven game that we are putting a lot of effort into, like, telling this heartfelt story in. Yeah, I don't know. We're super excited about it. It's going to be coming out pretty soon. Can't say the date yet, but pretty soon. And which is also exciting because then we'll be hopefully moving on to other projects too.
Nice. All right. Well, I guess we'll sort of wrap things up here because no one's necessarily champing at the bit to do another interview after this one. So I guess just in terms of feedback on this project, I've already been kind of giving my thoughts as I've been going, but other stuff, I mean, so I don't know if, like, because the way the game is right now is that you definitely get into this feeling of, like, you approach an enemy ship and then you sort of pick your target, and then like maybe you try to dodge some of their incoming shots, but because it's hard to maneuver out of the way and it's hard to rotate your ship, and it's also hard to tell where they're targeting, it can be really difficult to avoid incoming shots. But, you know, all of that sort of like dodging and maneuvering is a little bit more of the arcadey feel of the game. So I'm trying to sort of couch my feedback on the idea that, like, well, you could be taking this in one of two very distinct directions here. Oh, excellent. One of our viewers just mentioned just whitelisted Gardener and the Wild Vines. Love how it looks.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
All right. Yeah, indeed. Thank you very much. Dial Dylan. Okay. Wow. For some reason, the placement of the letters there, without a capitalization, I was really reading those as like all one word. Okay, Dial Dylan. That's not so hard to say. But yeah, so right now you kind of just get near someone, target their command module, and maybe try to dodge some incoming shots, have a shootout before one of you dies. Hopefully them. So I can imagine that in a more sort of tactical version of the game, I'm not sure if you can necessarily increase the ship's maneuverability, because, you know, with the fact that your ship is a very peculiar shape, like maybe at best you would want to, you know, rotate so that you like expose the broadside cannons. Like, if turrets couldn't shoot through your own ship, then the rotation becomes much more important.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah. So there's a couple different ways. One of the thoughts that we've already had was how in FTL, when you target certain modules, your bullets don't really travel in two-dimensional space and just collide with the first thing they hit. Mm-hmm. They are going to try to hit the thing that you've targeted, and kind of like D&D style, they will hit or miss depending on like various stats, like your mobility and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the approaches that we thought about, and some other stuff too is like, if we move away from the arcadey stuff, I really want to like make greater use of the context menus that you get when you click on a module, because just like, you know, from a development standpoint, we developed a pretty robust context menu system here, where it's like super easy to add new functionality to an existing module and make it do whatever you want, and just like add in like, hey, suddenly this module is able to do this or that and spawn this or that. But right now, as you can see, like 90% of the time, the only options you're ever selecting is just jettison. So it was kind of like a over-engineered feature and over-engineered, underutilized feature that I'd love to sort of experiment with some more. For instance, being able to like say, oh hey, I can see the enemy is targeting this module, let me just like quickly turn on this shield over here, or let me just like activate the ability on this module over here that I acquired that does this cool effect that instantly spins me around, or something neat like that. Basically like letting you like build your suite of skills by amassing a variety of neat modules with neat effects.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the things that I think we want to keep that is kind of in this a little bit, or it's at least in this as much as we could get in a jam, but is almost like that Banjo-Kazooie type of feel, where like you can make any kind of car you want based off the pieces you have. It may be good, it may be bad, but a lot of the fun of that game was like, I want to make a, quote, motorcycle that has no wheels and just one jet engine. Can I do that, and can I still win this race? Or, do I need to make a car with turrets and, just a lot of fun things. So we want to keep that, like, I want to be able to experiment and make different types of ships that do different things, and not lose, like, kind of this new, like, tactical approach that we would be going for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Okay. Let's see. Long range support. That would be interesting. So the ability to like maybe snipe at some enemies, like get the drop on them if you can shoot them from further away.
I mean, yeah, definitely a variety of modules would be a big focus of making sure that, you know, because the game is also designed to be a roguelike, so having each run feel super different just depending on the modules that you acquire and the build that you make, and letting there be some really fun synergies between different components.
Yeah. Because, I mean, again, the key part of that is you have to want to use the modules. Right now, you don't want to select individual turrets, right? Like, that would just really bring down your fun and make it way more tedious. But, you know, with more careful design, we can hopefully get it to feel like, oh, I want to do individual things.
Yeah, nice. All right. Well, I think... I don't know. I guess with that said, I'm really looking forward to seeing what direction you eventually evolve this game, and I would love to give it another try when you've kind of picked something and are moving in that direction. Maybe we can even just have a conversation. It doesn't even have to be something to play just yet, but if you just want a sounding board to just have a conversation about what you've decided at some point down the line. But yeah, until then, best of luck on your continued progress on Gardener and the Wild Vines. And I'll just go ahead and repost that link in chat. Is there any other things you want me to promote just well before we wrap things up?
That should be it. Just everyone, go wishlist Garden of the Wild Vines, please. And yeah, thank you again for inviting us, Gabriel. It's been awesome chatting with you. Really appreciate all your feedback and your perspective. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, likewise, thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation with me. It has been a lot of fun. So, thank you, Kartik, and thank you, Eric, for joining me on the stream here today. We've been playing Space Scrap Shuffle. I'll go ahead and drop a link to that in chat as well. And as they said, go ahead and wishlist the Gardener and the Wild Vines, which I'm going to remember the name of that someday. All right. Have a good evening then, and hopefully we'll get to talk again soon.
Awesome. Bye, Gabriel.
All right. Good night. Bye-bye.